Hello and welcome back once again to After the Credits. So finally got back to the theater once again. Had to make a trip across town to the Dollar Theater. Only got a chance to see one movie today, which I really hated, but the times just weren't lining up and I had a few other things I had to take care of. So only got around to seeing one. There are still a couple more there that I want to see, so maybe a couple days or my next day off I might go over and see a couple more if they're still playing, because I know some new stuff's probably going to be opening this week or next week, so I got to see these eventually or I'm going to end up missing them. But the one I really wanted to see was The Forest. So got around to seeing that finally. Oh, what a disappointment. Sorry, but it was. The preview made it look really cool. Same thing like with The Boy. It looked really cool, but anytime a horror movie looks cool in the preview, go into it expecting for it to suck, because it usually does. So the movie opens with a lot of random jumping around, like a lot of jump cuts, worse than my videos. And it's kind of jumping around this story of this woman whose sister is in Japan, and then it's like cutting back and forth to like different events in her life to where she eventually finds out her sister's gone missing, and then it like jumps to another couple scenes. So it's almost like it's speeding through like a week of her life, where she gets the news that her sister's gone missing and then decides to go looking for her. At least that's what I gathered from the way it was jumping, because it was so intermittently cut and it wasn't really telling you anything about what was actually going on other than the girl was missing and she's my sister, I'm going to look for her. Why they couldn't just have one establishing shot of that happening, why they had to keep doing these random jump cuts, was kind of weird, other than I can only assume it was to show the passage of time. So she goes to Japan to look for her sister, who's gone missing in the Suicide Woods, which apparently is actually a real thing. I don't know, I didn't bother to look it up like the trailer tells you to, but from what I hear, it's actually a real place. I think it's the forest at the base of Mount Fuji, if I remember right. They were talking about it briefly in the movie. I think they said Mount Fuji. And basically, the story behind the woods that I remember is a long time ago, like during times of famine in Japan, when a lot of people weren't expected to survive, they would take the sick and elderly out into the woods and just kind of leave them there, kind of like the old stories of like what the Eskimos or the Inuits, if you want to call them properly now, when they used to put their elders on ice floats and send them out to the ocean to die, rather than them being a burden on the village. So it's something similar to that. So then apparently all those spirits are kind of trapped in the woods, and anytime someone goes off trail in the woods, they start to hear voices and see things, and it makes them depressed and suicidal if they have any sadness in their life. Or it can just drive you mad to the point where you consider suicide. Some people go there camping with the intention of committing suicide, but then as they're there, they may change their mind. So there's like some rule that if you bring a tent, you haven't fully committed yet. So there's like some people they find along the trail camping. But anyway, back to the story. So she gets to Japan, and she's going around looking for her sister. She checks with like the local ranger station near the forest, and they're like, yeah, we found her. And she goes to look at the body, and it's not her sister. So then she goes to a bar where her sister had possibly been a couple days before, and this random guy comes up. He's like, don't I know you? And she's like, yeah, I was here 4 days ago. And he's like, oh, no, I'm sorry, that was just a cheesy pickup line. Like, didn't you go to such and such summer camp? Like, just trying to make small talk. And she's like, oh, I thought maybe you knew my sister. She was in here 4 days ago, and shows him like a picture on her phone or whatnot. And he's like, oh, no, I haven't seen her. So he asked the bartender, and the bartender's like, yeah, she was here a few days ago, but haven't seen her since. So then the guy turns out to be a reporter, and he's like, if you'll let me write about your story. He goes, I have a friend in the park commission who does like suicide walks through the park and tries to find people and bodies and whatnot and report like where they are so they can get them out. He's supposed to be going in to the forest tomorrow or the next day or something like that. So, if you're willing to let me accompany to write your story, I'll see if I can get you access to come with us, to tag along with us. So she agrees to that, and they set off into the forest, and they're kind of wandering around, and that's when the guy who does the suicide walks is kind of telling all the information about the Suicide Woods and its history and whatnot. They eventually find the sister's tent, and all her stuff's there, and they're like, well, if she's not here, she might already be dead. And then she's like, no, because we're twins, we have this sense with each other where we kind of know that the other one's still there. And she starts telling this story about one time when her sister attempted to commit suicide. She hears this kind of voice of her sister in the back of her head to know she's there. And then when her sister tried to commit suicide before, the voice went silent, and that's how she knew something was wrong. And because she can still hear that voice now, she knows that her sister's still alive somewhere. So the guy's like, okay, well, her tent's here. Just leave her a note. We'll come back in the morning and look for her again. And she's like, no, what if she's lost and doesn't know how to get back to the tent? We got to stay here and look for her. And the guide says, well, I'm going to leave. If you want to stay, I'll come back for you in the morning. Just stay here in case she comes back. Don't wander off or you'll get lost and we'll be looking for two people. Makes sense, right? So they end up camping out there, and this sister starts hearing voices and stuff like that. And he told her earlier that the forest will play tricks on you. If you hear things or see things, they're not real. You just have to remember it's all in your head and not give in to them. So throughout the night, she starts having these dreams and stuff and seeing things. And there's a few times in the movie they try and play up jump scares and really, even the music. Most movies will have that tense music to make a scene tense, and then there's a jump scare, and you're like, oh yeah, you got me with a jump scare, real original. This one, even the tense music didn't make it tense. It's you would see something, and you're like, okay, something's going to happen here. And then they start playing the tense music, and then when the jump scare happens, you're just like, okay, whatever. At one point, she sees, I don't remember exactly who it was. It was some type of, I think it was a child or an old lady or something. Or, no, I think the first time it was a child, a schoolgirl. And, no, it was actually, she was having a dream about her sister. And they showed in the preview, I think, where she unzips the tent in the basement and her younger version of her sister's inside. So then, as she's dreaming, she sees her little sister, and then she's trying to talk to her, and then it does that elongated face thing, the hollow eyes and the really stretched out mouth, kind of like, is it in The Grudge when they did that? When the girl's like, and her face just stretches really weird. They did that, and I was like, okay, that was kind of lame. Then at another point, she was walking down a hallway. I forget where she even was in that scene, but there was this old lady standing at the end of the hallway, and you see her there, you're like, okay, what's this old lady up to? And then you're like, okay, it's probably going to be a jump scare. And then they get to the old lady, and she turns around, and she's just like, ah! And it's just this demented old blind lady. The only really good jump scare was when she first got to Tokyo and she's in the back of the cab and someone hits the window and it's just some random old guy. That part actually was okay, that was a decent jump scare, but it wasn't scary. It was just kind of the bang from him hitting the windows what startled you. But yeah, then they do the old lady scene. Then she sees the old lady again in the woods. Actually, there's 3 or 4 of them, and she does that thing again, except this time she kind of runs at her. And she just zips up the tent, and that's it. And then she just kind of sees like these creepy scarecrows at one point, and they're not really all that creepy. They're just kind of like, okay, why are these people look like scarecrows? I think they're supposed to be like corpses, but the prosthetics that they put on it just made it look really weird. Then she sees like this other schoolgirl who's kind of like leading her around the woods trying to help her find her sister. Which, why is this schoolgirl lost in the woods? That makes no sense. But then like at one point her face changes to like this demonic thing. Like it almost looks like they just threw exorcist makeup on her, and it's like poorly done and just looks like crap. Yeah, so it was just every time they try to do a jump scare or use some type of prosthetic, it was really horrible. Then it actually starts getting into this mental mind game. Like the guy that's with her, she starts to second guess him because he kind of starts to like lash out at her, like he might have ulterior motives. So she starts to question him. And then like at another point, he comes back and saves her, and he's being friendly again. So they walk off to look for their sister again. And then, like, at one point, he starts to act like a jerk again, and then she's kind of like, okay. And then she runs away from him, and it's never really revealed if he was actually up to something or if she was imagining it. Because, like, most of the time he seemed friendly, but then, like, randomly he would just, like, have these little bits, and you're never sure if it's in her imagination or if it's actually happening. And then, like, at one point, she doesn't trust him, so he like gives her a knife, and he's like, "Here, now do you trust me?" And so she's got the knife, and then she like goes to, that was after he saved her, because she had fallen into this pit. And then like she's like, "Yeah, let me just go wash off in the river." So she's down there washing off in the river, and she had this cut on her hand or something that they had bandaged up earlier, and like she's taking the bandage off to wash it, and she sees like maggots in it. But then, like, she starts seeing them, like, crawling through her wrist, so she starts to put the knife to her wrist like she's going to cut them out. And then he kind of, like, hollers at her, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm coming." So that's when she starts having, like, these things where it's like, is she having a mental breakdown? Is she actually seeing things? Her story is, like, fluctuating dramatically. So then she gets to a point where she starts having flashbacks to her childhood, and like some things about her past that she told a story about end up being completely different than what she thought they were, and she starts to remember the truth, I guess, or maybe it's more people playing games. Although the way the truth came out, it kind of plays into some of the things she said earlier not making sense. So then, like, at one point, she sees her father, and he, like, grabs hold of her wrist, and she's like, "No, Dad, let me go." And then she, like, starts cutting at his hand with the knife, and you can kind of guess what happens from there. So then it turns out that her sister is still alive, and her sister starts hearing screaming and kind of starts running, trying to either get away from it or find where it's coming from, and ends up finding her way out of the woods and into the waiting arms of the rescue party. Spoilers, by the way. And she's like, "Are you guys real?" And they're like, "Yeah, we came here looking for you." And she's like, "Well, where's and then like, "Where's your sister?" And she's like, "What do you mean, she's not with you?" Like, "No, she came here days ago looking for you." And she's like, "She's still in there. We have to go back." And they're like, "No, wait, it's getting dark. We'll come back in the morning." And then, big spoiler here because this is the end of the movie. As she's she's kind of like fighting them, and then she stops, and she's like, "Oh no, poor Sarah," I think her name was, poor Sarah. And as you kind of realize that voice that Sarah was talking about that she hears from her sister, this sister also hears, and that voice just went quiet. And yeah, you kind of find out that Sarah died. Obviously, if I didn't give it away when I said she started cutting at her father's hand, who wasn't really there. He was in her head. She was actually like cutting her own wrist. And then it tries to give you one last jump scare because the original guide is kind of standing by the walk path as they're leading her out, and he sees a figure standing there, and he kind of turns back because he thinks it might be Sarah coming out as well. Like, oh, maybe we found her, or maybe it's someone else. And then it does like a zoom in on her, and she looks up, and it's like just this distorted, poorly prosthetic face, and they're trying to do like one last jump scare, and it was just really crap. Yeah, I wasn't into it at all. Not as much as I thought I was going to be. Again, I don't know, like horror movies, they make their previews look amazing, and then they end up telling you like most of the story in the preview, and they don't really leave anything else to it. As far as the star rating on this one, like I said, the beginning narration was really rushed with all the random cut scene, or like jump to this scene for 2 seconds, jump to this scene for 2 seconds, then back to this scene for 2 seconds, then back to that scene for 2 seconds. And like I said, the only thing I can figure is they were trying to do a passage of time that they really didn't need to do. And then like the entire backstory, I know they're trying to keep it shrouded in a little bit of mystery, but it was barely talked about. It was almost like they needed more filler. Honestly, for it being an hour-and-a-half movie, it didn't really seem like at first I'm kind of like, okay, I don't understand what all this jump scene stuff is about, so can we just get to the movie? But then once we finally got to it, it didn't really seem like it took that long. A lot of stuff that you feel they probably could have cut out. If they did, it would be like a 10-minute movie. But at the same time, it didn't feel like the runtime was a full hour and a half. Like when it ended, I was kind of like, okay, that was kind of short. So it needed more filler in certain parts and less filler in others, if that makes sense. Yeah, just overall, the backstory could have been fleshed out more. The random crap at the beginning could have been done away with and just had one scene. More filler in some parts, less filler in others. And just work on your jump scares, because it was not, like, the only one that got me was the old man hitting the window, and it was like, really? Everything else was really telegraphed and predictable. They didn't use the music stings well. Nothing to actually get a good jump scare out of you. There was nothing really spooky about this at all. So as far as a star rating, I'm going to give it like a 1.5. I would give it lower than that, but the story of the Suicide Woods is actually interesting. This movie, on top of that story, not as interesting. But, just to kind of learn about the Suicide Woods and like what it's all about was actually kind of interesting. That part, I think, is actually what made the movie seem not so long, is because I was actually learning about that as they kind of went on. And it's like, oh, that's kind of an interesting thing. Too bad this crap is on top of this possibly interesting documentary. Yeah, but not really. It wasn't like found footage or anything like that when I say documentary. I'm just saying, like, they're telling you about this woods that, unless you live in Japan, you probably didn't know about until this movie. And because of that, it makes the movie watchable, but at the same time, I've seen better movies. Yeah, if you want to learn about the Suicide Woods, check it out. Otherwise, pass on it. It's a quick sit, but it's a weak sit. Yeah, there's not really much to it at all. So yeah, 1.5 on this one. As much as I hate to say it, because, like I said, there is some watchability to it, but really not enough. Maybe like when it hits Redbox, check it out for $1 or whatever Redbox charges. If it comes on TV, maybe sit through it. It might be worth that. As far as like paying theater prices, no, just don't do it. Don't buy it on DVD either. It's not worth that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So that is it for this episode. I'll probably get to the theater tomorrow morning after work. The movies are starting to start a little bit earlier, so I don't have to wait quite as long. I only have a 2-hour wait now instead of a 3-hour wait. So I'll probably see something tomorrow, not sure what. But until then, as always, thanks for watching. Remember to like, comment, rate, subscribe, and share the video. Links are up here, I believe, somewhere up there, or they should be in the description, because hopefully I've started doing that and not been a complete lazy ass this past week. But until next time, as always, thank you for watching, and we will see you after the credits.